About 6 months after I had the near-death experience and I began learning meditation, I was sitting up on a mountain up in North Carolina, and right before sunset, I looked over towards the southwest and I saw a beautiful silver disc, seamless, close encounter of the first kind. It looked exactly like the ET craft I'd seen when I was 8 or 9, when I was a child in North Carolina, which actually ignited my interest in all of this. So I said, oh, well, they're back. I didn't think much more about it. So I sat to meditate, and I went into this very deep meditation. By the time I came out of the meditation, it was very pitch dark, and there was the whole Milky Way galaxy was above my head, and a thought was sent into me that was very clear. It wasn't my random thought or hallucination at all. And it said, behold what a beautiful universe God has made. And with that, I went right into the state of consciousness that I was in the near-death experience, except now I'm awake and standing on the mountain. And at that instant, I became aware that there was sort of a glow, an energy field right below the peak and through the forest. I thought it was a deer standing on its hind legs. And it had these beautiful deer-like eyes. And I went, what is that doing here? And I realized it wasn't a deer, and it actually appeared and then dematerialized, came over and touched me on the right shoulder. But I could sense its energy field was still there. It was phasing in and out of 3D and the near dimension of astral energy. And when it touched my right shoulder, I could actually see my ski jacket indent. And all my hair stood on end. It was like this electromagnetic pulse. And I had long hair, and it was sort of ding. At that instant, I vanished off the mountaintop onto the ship. And then we were, bang, almost instantly out in space. So at that point, I stayed in this meditative state and was teaching the ETs what it was like to be in that state of consciousness, but also be a boy, a young man on Earth. They were very interested in this. And then we kind of merged together in our meditation, and I created with them this protocol for making contact with them.
2 years later, Dr. Greer attempted to recreate the experience during a meditation teacher training course in the French Alps, resulting in the first mass witness CE5.
What we experienced in France was really life-changing for me. It was the summer of 1975, and that was the year we both turned 20. When we were in teacher training, it was very intensive. We were meditating, doing yoga, listening to endless tapes of Maharishi.
So I did a deep meditation, went into this state, and could sense where in space these ET crafts were, connected to them, introduced myself by name, and then vectored them like you would vector a jet into JFK Airport.
All of a sudden, right out of nowhere, appeared a metallic, silent, tetrahedron-shaped silver ship. It just appeared. And I said, what is that, Steve? There was no sound. And it was just suspended in the air and then gone. And there was just the blue sky again.
It will happen if you do it with just a pure state of innocence about it. And that's when I realized that this can actually be done with groups of people. And I just filed that away.
Snoopy 2, if you would, turn towards the tower and show me your light so I can look over that way with the glasses. Snoopy 2, Roger. We got, I don't know where they got to now. There was 2 of them. They were low, and then they went to about 4,000 foot and started circling. There was 2 of them, no navigation lights at all on.
In 1977, Dr. Greer discovered how precisely he could vector ETs to a specific location. Upon reconnecting with those beings using the CE5 protocols, he showed them his location in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but first directed them to where he was born and raised, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Then he went to sleep.
2 objects over the Coliseum. Yeah, I do have something. I got a Cessna out there eastbound. I don't know what the other one is. Negative, you got 2 of them out here and they keep circling.
Unbeknownst to him, that attempt to initiate contact precipitated a major sighting over Charlotte involving pilots and air traffic control. An insider has leaked the FAA traffic control tapes that corroborate corroborated the encounter.
Snoopy 2, no sir, I'm not painting a target right now. Never did, Roger. We got something out here flying around. I don't believe in flying saucers, but it ain't aircraft, so I don't know what it is.
What I experienced was that I'm awakened, and there's this kind of beautiful cobalt blue chip, maybe 20 feet above the ground outside my window, the bedroom window. This wakes up my housemate, who's in the bedroom adjacent to mine. He comes running out, says, "What did you do?" And the lesson from that was the specificity of the vector. In other words, I was very specific. I vectored them first to Charlotte, showed them where Charlotte was, the epicenter where all this was going on, was over the part of Charlotte where I was born and all that, and then guided them from there up here. And I think what they were saying to me is, we can be very specific with instructions, and we'll show you that. It was a teachable moment. And I sort of felt like I really shouldn't do this unless I have some higher purpose to.
Sounds like a close encounter. Never do, Roger.
In 1990, he formed the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence to disseminate the CE5 protocols and establish peaceful and sustainable relations with ET life forms. 2 years later, Dr. Greer and his team went up to Woodborough Hill in Wiltshire, England. There, they visualized and thought a geometric pattern symbolizing the trilogy of components that make up the CE5 protocols: thought, light, and sound. Immediately, this crop circle appeared in the field nearby.
So some of these civilizations that we're interacting with on our teams are in the order of 1 billion years beyond our development. And all those beings in that civilization are in a state of unity consciousness that is so enlightened that they could be confused with, say, an angel or something. But they're not. They're not from, they're ETs with star systems and planets and bodies, but their level of consciousness would be at the level of, say, the highest spiritual realm. There's a precise correlation to the kind of technology that you will observe and the level of consciousness that civilization has attained. Let's take our own civilization. We're mostly still separate people, and we are operating through a reductionist separate paradigm. We're also still very violent and destructive. So let's look at our technologies. Oil, we're burning something and destroying the air. Nuclear power, we're splitting and tearing apart an atom to create heat, to turn a turbine, to create electricity. Coal, we're digging stuff up and destroying mountains and then burning this stuff in a fiery furnace. It's all very destructive. And so our technologies are a corollary to our inner state of consciousness.
In 1964, Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev proposed a hypothetical scale of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement based on the amount of energy they're able to utilize. A level 1 civilization, also called a planetary civilization, can use and store all the energy available on its planet.
At that point, their main focus becomes the development of higher states of consciousness. Because they have all the technologies to meet everyone's needs. There's no shortage. Their economic system is non-economic in the sense that there is an infinite abundance for everyone because of these technologies that can materialize things out of the substrate of space-time, the elementals of space-time. So at that point, a civilization becomes really focused on the development of higher states of consciousness. And as they evolve in consciousness, their technologies evolve with them. They will begin to then unfurl the mysteries of consciousness and the cities I mentioned earlier in the Vedas, but those get applied technologically, which include levitation, teleportation, dematerialization, bilocation, where the same object can be instantly resonantly created and be in two places at once. We've had this happen on our team.
As water by cooling and condensation becomes ice, so thought by condensation assumes physical form. Everything in the universe is thought in material form. Paramahansa Yogananda.
I like this story of this Lockheed Skunk Works top secret witness who defected. He was trying to learn a technique to go into meditation but then astrally project. And he did. And he went up out of his body with his astral body of light, went up into the air and slammed right into the side of an ET spacecraft. Well, what he couldn't understand was that when he bumped up against the ET spacecraft with his astral body, the body all of you, when you have a lucid dream and you're flying over the water or flying over, that is your body of light. Same thing when you have a near-death experience, you go in your body of light. Well, his astral body hit the side of this craft and it rocked it. And then he popped inside and the ETs were looking at him like, my God, why don't you watch where you're going? Cosmic faux pas. But he moved the ship. He says, how did my astral body move that ET spacecraft? I said, because the density of that spacecraft, resonantly, energetically, was identical to your astral body, because with the naked eye, it was shifted out of 3D into this dimension that is increasingly conscious energy and conscious forms. And since like can interface with like, your density of your astral body and that craft, because it was shifted to that level, it could interact with it. Now, had it been a 3D craft that had stepped down, like a transformer, stepped down into full 3D, he would have gone straight through it, because the density would have been different. The resonant field interface would have been different. And when I explained that to him, he said, now I understand so many things that have happened between me and ETs.
The great thing about CE5 is it's anything but remote. It is true contact.
Oh my God. That was great.
During a CE5 expedition at Mount Shasta, Dr. Greer and his team were in contact with an interstellar object and its occupants in the field in front of them. Suddenly, this light ship lifted off from the ground and turned left, phasing in and out of 3D space-time before vanishing in clear skies. This was visible to the naked eye for everyone present.
You know, Dr. Greer says our first interest is an academic interest, and in my case, that was how I got into this. But very quickly after that, it changes to a heart, mind, and soul connection that is really a very powerful driving force in your life. And it's important to go from the academic interest to the experience level. And that's what happens very quickly. You make this transition to an experience of this new lifestyle, this new understanding of our place in the universe. We wanted to take action because it's important to not only learn about this academically, but then to take action on it.
It was very empowering for me because I felt like they helped to let us know that we are on the right path, and then we have the power to make a change.
It changes you completely. It changes your heart. And then your entire life changes. All things from that point forward are possible.
I have a friend in Holland. Her name's Linda, and she has some very amazing footage that she's captured.
At first, I came from Estado, that's Norway, where you have a lot of activity there. I wanted to go to bed, and something said, no, you have to go outside. Putting my camera up, and then I said, okay, if you're there, can you just fly by and stop? So the craft came at very fast speed and stopped, and then, okay, and flew away.
This is amazing. It'll stop, turn left, turn right, move around at all kinds of angles. And she's had multiple events like this happen.
What will be evident in that footage is what she has actually asked for them to do. So I know there's one case where she has told me herself that they have produced a V shape, and she requested that in consciousness.
So I looked up, and suddenly something appeared in front of me, and then I said, are you there? And then they come out. They're divided themselves in 6 balls, and then 3 balls, and there were lots of other lights.
We see this quite often, but it's very unusual to get it on video. And this is why it's a fantastic example of the kind of maneuverability that these spacecraft can make.
I really do love it when people get things like that and they can show people that are new to the subject, because it's really inspiring.
I do want to know what the aliens look like.
All right. Well, the one, for example, that healed this man's hearing, who is in our circle, sort of very triangular head, about 5.5 feet tall. The photograph of it is beautiful, but the experience that this man had was more beautiful.
Had a great experience at Oracle and ended up having a healing experience.
We did these protocols and we got into meditation and things started to appear. And we're photographing it and we're seeing it and we're watching it and we're looking around and everyone's mouths are wide open. A lot of times these craft, they pop in and out so fast that to try and capture them on a telephoto lens is next to impossible.
While in deep meditation, they heard a being walking behind them, phasing in and out of 3D space-time. Marconi adjusted his camera to shoot in the direction that Dr. Greer pointed. All of a sudden, a teardrop-shaped, trans-dimensional object materialized between Ed Moen and a medical student, which was witnessed by most of the circle.
We reviewed my photos from that particular time, and there on the hillside, standing behind a man named Ed Moen, was this being that everyone's like, whoa, what is this?
This being has a very triangular face and has been seen on a number of our expeditions, and they are known as master healers.
Ed he wore hearing aids in both ears, and he couldn't hear, half the things people were saying to him.
I had hearing loss, from high school. I would avoid parties and social settings where lots of people would gather together because it was uncomfortable not to be able to hear. Got to my room and I felt this draw to go back out there. So I got up and walked out and I saw this red light out in the middle of the desert about 300 feet away or so. I connected with it right away. I could feel it. I knew that it was aware of me and that it was indeed the thing that was calling me. So I invited it to come and hang out. At one point, Daniel heard me talking to this red orb and he couldn't believe it either. He went and got his camera and took a short video clip of this red orb.
He said that for the next 45 minutes he had a communication with them, and at the end of the conversation he said, "Do you think you can do something about my hearing?"
Got some sleep, and when I woke up, I went out to breakfast with some of the people in the group. I had hearing aids, and they weren't with me at breakfast, and it was a very emotional event for me to discover that I could hear everything everyone was saying. at the table, and not only at my table, but at tables away from me. And I haven't worn my hearing aids since. I had a hard time finding them to bring them here. They do a very good job, but not as good as the ETs did. It's changed my life. You know, it really has. And that's the part that gets me.
I didn't know this happened to him until I saw him the next day on the hammock. And he was just relating this story, and he was crying like a baby. And just to watch the emotion coming out of him was very moving, and he's had perfect hearing since then.
My takeaway from the event and from my experience with the ETs is that they've been in my life a long time. I just didn't know it. It's such a beautiful world waiting for us.
It's useful for us to think about our own experience over the last couple hundred years. You go back 200 and some years and show Thomas Jefferson a modern smartphone. To anyone of that period, it would look like something that was magic.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke.
We're dealing with civilizations where almost every aspect of how they appear in our time-space would look like magic to us. And in the CIA, this is actually called WSFM. Sounds like a radio station. It stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. A spacecraft can be completely 3D like you see a solid aircraft. It can be partially in this dimension, but shifted mostly into another dimension. So I liken this to like when you're turning a dial on an old AM radio and you can move it across and you suddenly pick up Chicago and New York at the same time. They're bleeding together, dimensional bleeding. And so often these ET craft will be partially in this dimension, but mostly out. And all that we will detect in this dimension might be an electronic signature, orb, or an object that appears and flashes in and out, a scintillation of light that then vanishes, or an object that comes in where it looks almost like a hologram of an ET being that will be standing amongst us, but it's an electronically teleported version of that conscious being. I love this one. His name is Bijou. It's pronounced Bijou. He's an interstellar being from Andromeda, and he has a very bright-looking nose because there was a orb here that teleported him onto the site. With the naked eye, the only thing that was seen was this sphere that came up right beside my shoulder.
What was amazing is there was a light kind of illuminating this being. He was just floating in sort of this energetic space, and it looked like he was waving at me.
He's sort of doing this, floating. He's in the air maybe 5 feet up. When I asked him where he was from, he said it was from Andromeda galaxy.
Sometimes I have to pinch myself and make sure, I do a little self-check to make sure I'm just really seeing something or it's not my imagination. But that was a huge confirmation that, we are really onto something with what we're doing, that we are really making contact. The ETs are participants in the whole story and this whole unfoldment. So it's really amazing that you're communicating with someone from, an entirely different world, and it's mind-boggling, really.
Now this is beautiful. We were on the beach and this appears right on the sand in front of me, and you can see the eyes very faintly. It's barely in this dimension. It's very crystalline. It's pitch black on this beach. This being highly intelligent, an extraterrestrial civilization at the level of the celestial. So it visualized humanity evolving to the point that everyone on Earth were in cosmic consciousness and enlightenment. That's what we're talking about. 500,000 to 1 billion years ahead of us. Get a load of this. We're in a deep meditation I'm leading, and we're in cosmic consciousness. This is a Peruvian doctor, medical doctor. I call it the cosmic spermatozoa. It looks, and it comes in, and it wraps around her, and she begins to have the kundalini and an enlightenment experience like she's never had. And, of course, this happens a lot on these expeditions, but we got it on photograph. Isn't that cool? I love this one. It's just off the edge of the hill, and you see people turning to look. And it was this object that materialized into this dimension and lit up and then dematerialized. What I saw in my remote view was a very large craft filled with ETs from different civilizations that were joining us in the meditation. Because that's what they're interested in. They're interested if you have a pure heart, a clear intent, and you're wanting to join them in universal peace. That's it. They don't care about your degrees. They don't care about... This is what the Prince of Liechtenstein said. You know, I've gone all over the world where these UFOs are seen, and they're seen before I'm there and after, but when I'm there, they're not around. Maybe it's my attitude. I said, bingo.
Every experience that was described, no matter how unbelievable in Dr. Greer's books or the manuals, we've experienced them ourselves. And someone snapped a photo with their iPad, beams of energy with arrowheads on them coming out of members' third eye and the heart center. When we look closer at the photo here, there was a silhouette, and they were standing, before we had broken the circle, they were standing under the hands of people as we had held hands there. So you could see a bald being with a long robe, about 4 feet tall. So that was an amazing shot.
What I began to understand is that there's this whole spectrum of phenomena that involves 3D matter, light, sounds that emerge, tonality, electromagnetic interface. For example, we have electronic devices we'll have out, like a radar detector, magnetometers that pick up the magnetic field shift. Those will all start activated when a craft is approaching, and we're out in the middle of the wilderness where there's no source of this electromagnetic radiation, but they'll start communicating in a specific cadence and a repeatable cadence. And I call this trans-dimensional electronic communication. And they will actually take over the circuitry of these electronic devices we have out in the desert and begin to do a specific communication. Now, you have to decode it, but it's reproducible. And their different civilizations will have a different pattern. So this is an electronic version of them making contact.
On the shores of the Outer Banks in North Carolina, ETs produce these tones via the team's radar detector. An enormous golden object appeared, illuminating the ocean.
Yes.
Another object appeared and made a 180-degree turn, a maneuver that no satellite can make, then dematerialized in clear skies.
What comes up in the context of CE5 is something's happening. What is it? How's it going to affect me? Is it and all the drama comes up. The Independence Day images, the drama that's all through YouTube, all of the programming that is out there comes up because we're saturated in it. What I would suggest to people if they are experiencing fear or if they feel apprehensive about doing it, make sure you do it in a group. Make sure you set up the parameters of unity, of peace. This is a frequency that is far out of the spectrum of fear. So there's an incompatibility there in a scientific perspective. If you think about resonant waves, the energy, the gratitude, love, joy, peace, all of that, this is a frequency that you establish first through whichever practice appeals to you, and then extend your connection from there.
Researchers have discovered that remote viewing and meditation are most effective when the participant enters a heart contains 40,000 neurons that can sense, feel, learn, and remember. You can bring your mind and heart into this coherent state and have more access to intuitive knowing by consciously focusing on positive emotions during your meditation.
These beings they respond to our thought. They respond to our thought, so they will not be invasive. And if you're feeling like you want to continue whatever contact experience that is happening, but there may be a bit of residual fear that you're trying to work through, tell them. Say, look, I'd love to carry on doing this, but I feel a bit scared right now. Can you help me with that, And they will.
And that's the other evidence I know they're not hostile. We've been all over the world, thousands of hours, with thousands of people, have had all manner of contact at a distance, intimately, beings, ET beings appearing in our rooms, all kinds of things. No one has ever been harmed. No one has ever been harmed at all. This isn't an official document on the FBI website, sort of hidden in plain sight. But it really confirms everything that we're explaining, but also the experience we've had. And this isn't from 1947, so this is 72 years old. He goes through and describes that they are peaceful people. They traverse these dimensions, that they have these abilities in consciousness. He even relates to some of the Vedic terms of the kind of capabilities witnessed from these beings.
All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of the atom to vibration. I must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Max Planck, founder of quantum theory.
Even though what I'm doing with CE5 is what I'm most ridiculed for, it was the project that got the most respect and attention from the intelligence community because they knew it was real. They knew the science of consciousness is real. They knew that these ET civilizations utilize communication technologies that interface with thought, telepathy, and consciousness. They all know this. This is an open secret in the intelligence community. We all think that power is derived from your weapon system, your financial clout, the usual materialistic paradigm. The reason that the deeper elements of the intelligence community have this intense interest in it and don't want the public to know is that, first of all, it is extremely efficient spycraft, which they don't want others to have. Secondly, they know that if people understood the power of consciousness and of mass consciousness, they would be able to completely change the direction of the planet. That is, to me, the big secret.
Most people have heard of the random number generator studies through the Global Consciousness Project.
A question tonight, can you actually measure the emotional outpouring in a worldwide crisis?
Sometimes scientists think that they have done just that. Their machines and computers found a bizarre pattern right after several global disasters.
This was an experiment in which researchers placed dozens of random number generators around the world and analyzed their data to see if they could discover anything about global or collective consciousness.
On September 11th, a few hours before the first plane struck, this network of random number generators became more coherent. Less random and more coherent.
It may sound bizarre, but Dr. Nelson and his team have been at this for the better part of a decade. The first spike showed up in 1997 with the death of Princess Diana. Other events like the Concorde crash, the Madrid train bombing, and the Pope's funeral all registered on those random number generators. But early on the morning of September 11th, the data went off the charts.
The odds of this being a coincidence is less than 1 in 100 billion. This shows there is a deep relationship between collective consciousness and the physical world.
Sociology studies of meditators, where they go into a community, say you have a town of 200,000 people, and they would send in 1% of the population equivalent, 2,000 people, to go into deep meditation. And they found that emergency room visits declined, violent crimes declined, robberies, all kinds of negative behaviors declined, even though those people didn't even know they were in the city, because there is this resonant effect through the force, if you want to look at it that way, through this entangled, interwoven consciousness field. And people who didn't even know these meditators were there became more ordered, more peaceful, more happy, etc., and so on.
This was actually based on the studies done in quantum physics in which a container of helium was cooled down to absolute zero. When only 1% of the helium became aligned to coherent, the entire container went through a phase transition, instantly shifting into coherence and taking on almost magical properties, a state called superfluidity.
So there was this transformation at that 1% point. When a critical mass of people, and whether it's 1% or a fraction of that, depends on the state of consciousness of those who are practicing the meditation or a prayer or coherence. But at that point, you can shift an entire civilization. If we all become coherent, just 1% of us, like a molecule of helium, and we become aligned and coherent and move in the right direction, it will transform the other 99%, even though they don't know that we're doing it. And that's the beauty and the power of the structure of non-locality in consciousness, is that it's all interwoven, but there's enormous power when you're operating at that deeper level of consciousness. And that the intelligence community is very much afraid of, because that's something, A, they cannot control, and B, it would transcend their ability to alter the outcome.
The total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings. Dr. Erwin Schrödinger, Nobel Prize-winning physicist.
I'll tell a really funny story. In '92, the head of Army intelligence and a few of his minions intercepted me and took me to a hotel room, very threatening. There was a national security agency person there, CIA people. They were saying, "What the hell do you think you're doing? Teaching people to bypass our systems and contact these civilizations." I said, "I don't recognize your authority over this matter." And then I looked them in the eyes and I said, "I'm not afraid of you because I died when I was 17 and I know there is no death. I don't care about your money. And I've had direct contact with these civilizations, so you can't deceive me about who they are and why they're here." And the general just sat back like this and went, "Well, we know exactly who this son of a bitch is." And I said, "Yes, so this is what we're going to do." It was very frustrating for them. But later, a member of one of the European royal families, who I don't want to name, who was involved with that crowd, came up to me and she said, "You know, they're very jealous of what you and your team are doing." I said, "Jealous of what? These are the most powerful people." And he says, "No, they know that you guys actually collectively have all the power. And they wish they could do what you're doing, but they're in the box of this national security state program that they cannot escape from. And you're free. You're a free agent. You're free to do wonderful things, and they're not. And they're really jealous of what you guys are doing." It was a real insight into the sad psychology of the people who are in this pinched, small world. So I say to the public, you should be happy that you are not part of all of that. You have the freedom to do things they can never do. So let's do it.
It's good to know that we have the tools we need when we apply C5 protocols. So anybody can do it, no matter where you're from, what background. You can just learn the protocols. We have a lot of friends from around the world who never been on one of these expeditions, and they just go online and use the protocols and apply them and have wonderful experiences.
I'm practicing CE5 in Cambridgeshire,
Colorado Springs,
Preston, British Columbia, Canada,
Geraldton, Western Australia,
Buttersville, North Carolina,
Lexington, Michigan,
Moorhead, Kentucky,
Vancouver Island,
Shelton, Washington,
New Zealand.
CE5 を実践しています。鮫島と申します。
Melbourne, Australia, Riverdale, Georgia,
beautiful Buckingham, Virginia,
Essen, Germany,
Ontario, Canada, Scappoose, Oregon,
Vancouver,
Guadalajara, Sydney, Australia,
Winchester, Virginia,
and Darlington, England,
Orlando, Florida, Knoxville, Tennessee,
and Freistadt in Austria, Dubai, United Arab Emirates,
Alexandria, Virginia,
Beit Shemesh, Israel,
Albuquerque, New Mexico,
Japan, 江ノ島チームです。C5 やってます。
Indianapolis, Indiana,
England,
Signet, Tasmania.
We are doing a CE5 in Hong Kong and making history.
People from all walks of life are becoming interstellar ambassadors and experiencing transcendent states of consciousness in union with these beings. Thousands are making contact by simply using the guided meditation in the CE5 Contact app. It's up to the children of Earth to become active participants in the unfolding of our universe and not leave it to the power elite. Once we reach a critical mass of people, a coherent and enlightened minority can transform the rest of humanity instantly.
It's more about what your intent is. Do you have a pure heart, for lack of a better word? Do you have a clearness in your mind and in your heart? Can you bring your mind and heart into resonance together and invite these civilizations to connect with you in this great purpose, this great journey that we're launching on as a civilization where we are going to become interstellar? Interestingly, there was a colonel named Philip Corso, and Colonel Corso wrote a book the day after Roswell, and one of the events that wasn't known was this encounter he had with an ET at White Sands missile range, and right not far from where the first atomic bomb was dropped. And this was 1956, and an interstellar vehicle came in, and it landed. So he gets in his Jeep, rushes out.